Hello, Jambo, Karibu. Welcome to my channel. My name is Chilanda and this is Library Without Borders. Okay guys, welcome to my channel again. I hope you're having a blessed day as I'm filming this. It is Saturday and it is April 1st. So we have come to the end of the month and this is my wrap-up video. I will be telling you about all the books that I've read for the month of March. And boy oh boy did I travel around the world. Now, I'm gonna try to make it short so that the video is not too long. Because guys, when I start talking about books, I can go on forever. So as I said guys, I traveled around the world. So my first stop on my travel journey was in Angola, where I learned about Jinga of Angola. Now, I've already done a full review about this book, and since this is a wrap-up video, I'm just going to briefly mention what this book was about. So this book is obviously a historical book, and it talks about Queen Jinga, who was renowned as a fearless queen. She was known as one of the greatest queen because she fought endlessly against the Portuguese army in order to keep her land for her and her people. It's interesting because this book tells the story of a queen that's been misunderstood, and it's to clarify a little bit of who she was and to talk about all the things she did and why she did them, but also her relentless pursuit for the conversion of her people to Christianity, but also her talents of negotiating with Portuguese and Dutch people, but also among her tribes in order to build the army that she was known for. The story also talks about her hand in the slave trade, why she did or participated in the slave trade. So as I said, I will not spend too much time on this book, but it is definitely a must read. And as I mentioned before in the video, there's also a documentary about her on Netflix, so check that out. Next on my list, I traveled across the border and I found myself in the belly of the Congo. And it's a book written by Blaise Ndala. So this book talks essentially about a princess in Kasai from the Kuba kingdom who falls in love with a white man around a time where interracial relationships are not allowed. And it's her story of how she is also shipped in Brussels and exposed during a world fair called Expo 1958. And she is exposed there among other Congolese people in front of all these white people. While Princess Chala is exposed there in Brussels, she's obviously exiled, and she found herself there because she had to escape her dad's fury. And because René Comer could not keep her, he sends her to stay with his friend, and that friend decides to ship her in Brussels. That's how she finds herself there. And at some point during the story, again, I'm not going to get into it because I have a full review on this book as well, we are introduced to her niece, who also shares the same name with her, who's gonna go on a mission in 2005, because this story, or the beginning of the story where we talk about Princess Chala, is said during the 1930s, 1940s, and 50s, and then skipped all the way to 2005, where we meet the niece, who's gonna go on a mission to find out what happened to Princess Chala. So I don't do ratings, guys, but if I have to rate this book, it is 4 out of 5 for me. Why not a 5? Just because nothing is perfect. Okay, that's a perfect score. Nothing in life is perfect, so 4 out of 5 it is. Alright guys, so after that roller coaster of emotions that I went through in the belly of the Congo, I decided to pack up my stuff and go far away, and I found myself in London, and this is where I met Eve in Someday Maybe, and it is a book by Oni Nwabineli. Guys, I don't even know where to begin. This book, I was crying. Like, I was crying just because the author did a great job, by the way, in trying to make you feel what Eve was feeling. So this story is about death, about grief, about suicide. So please look out for those triggers, because it can really affect you. It is a story between Q and Eve. Q is her white husband, and they are married. They've been married for 10 years. And one day, suddenly, Q decides to take his own life without leaving a note. And you can just imagine the heartbreak that Eve is following, because they loved each other. There was never a hint of their marriage being on the rocks or anything like that. So she goes through a tremendous cycle of grief, of questioning herself, of like trying to come to terms with the idea that her husband took his own life, and trying to see if she missed any hints that he was going through anything that she could have missed noticing. Guys, as I was reading and just reading about her story and how she was surrounded by her Nigerian family, there were instances where there was a bit of laughter, especially when she talks about her parents who were so protective, and sometimes how her mom would like call out on Jesus and speak the Igbo language. I really enjoyed that. And she also had a best friend, B, that was like there for her, and like her brother who did everything they could possibly to just kind of be there each day for her so that she could make it. It is a sad story, but nonetheless very enjoyable to read. Oni did a great job in writing this book, because it gave me all the feels it needed the reader to feel. So at some point I was like, if something like this happens to me, like to my babe, oh my gosh, like I was going crazy just trying to imagine. So I understood, I'm not gonna say I understood, but like I felt Eve's grief, trying to navigate and trying to understand, and in the end make peace with what happened to her husband. So if you didn't read this book, please read it. It is quite a book. So next, after again going through all that grief, I decided that I needed a change of scenery. So I traveled all the way to the United States. I found myself in Philadelphia, where I met Ruby, and I went to Washington, D.C., where I met Eleanor Pride. Now, this book is The House of Eve by Sadika Johnson, and this book, it was on my radar to read, but the person who convinced me to read is Lex Reed. She really talked a lot about this book. She seemed to enjoy quite a lot. So I decided to pick it up, and I did enjoy the book. Now, this story talks about two different young ladies. One of them is Ruby. Now, Ruby lives in Philly, and she decides to start this relationship with Shimi. And Shimi is obviously a Jew, and it's during the 1950s. And at that time, again, there is no mixing. Like, whites and blacks do not mix. So they decide to have this little affair on the low. And Ruby is like 15 years old. She's pretty young. It's basically a story of them trying to navigate the barrier that is obviously between them, and also wanting to give in to the love that they feel for each other. And obviously she goes and lives with her aunt because her mom is not trying to take care of her. So she is basically forced to live with her aunt. And her aunt finds out about this. And the mother of Shimi also finds out about the affair. Now, she has to get a scholarship because she needs to go to university. But then something happens. She is pregnant. I won't spoil the story, guys, but she's pregnant, and now she needs to figure out basically how she's gonna navigate this whole pregnancy with a Jew and the mother of Shimi, also her family, and if she's gonna keep the kid, what happens to her scholarship. That's basically what happens between Ruby and Shimi. Then in Washington, D.C., we meet Eleanor. Eleanor is she comes from a decent family of Negroes. That's how they're called back then. And he falls in love with this boy, William Pride. And I actually, guys, I have the book, but I decided to listen to the audio, and I'm so happy because the ladies were narrating the story, did a great job with the accents and their voices, so I recommend listening to the book. But yes, so we meet William Pride, who falls in love with Eleanor. But then William's family is a family of people who can pass. I don't know if you know about passing, but it's definitely Negroes who are, or black people who are almost white, that they can pass for white people. And the mother of William sees Eleanor, and Eleanor is basically, she's brown, probably like my skin tone, and the mother does not want anything to do with Eleanor. And then this girl called Greta, and Greta is obviously, she grew up with William, and that's the person that the mom wants William to marry, but William is in love with Eleanor. So we obviously follow their story through all these obstacles that their relationship will meet. It is quite a lovely story, and also there are a few triggers as well in this book, because at some point Eleanor does go through miscarriage, and it becomes almost the elephant in the room between her and William. And at some point in the story, they decide to adopt because she does not want to, like, she can't be pregnant, so they decide to adopt. And there's a twist in the end, guys. Again, I'm not spoiling the story, but there is a twist in the end. So I really was like, I hope there's a sequel, because oh my god. But anyway, so I really enjoyed the story. I had a lot of fun reading the story, and also it brought different emotions in me simply because of the whole racism that existed then, but also that whole colorism. It was quite a subject that Sadika Johnson tackled in here, and I know she's also the author of Yellowwife, which is on my TBR as well, and I'm gonna get to it. I've already read a book about passing. It's The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, so I'm not too eager to go back into that kind of story again, but I'll get to it eventually. That was essentially what the book was about, so I hope that if you haven't picked it up yet, that you pick it up, because it is a beautiful story. So again, I'm quite an emotional wreck by this time, okay? So I decided to travel back in time during the World War II. I had no pity for my poor soul. And I went, and there I met Lolly. And Lolly is in The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. Now, guys, that book, I was crying. Oh my god, I was crying. It is obviously about the concentration camp that happened in Auschwitz, and it is a story, it's a love story, obviously, set in hard times, and it is during World War II, and it follows Lolly and Gita. I love that name, Gita. And this book, I actually listened to it on Audible, and I recommend listening to it because the people narrating the voices did a great job. So as I said, it is a story, a love story between Lolly and Gita, and they are transported to this camp, and through the atrocities that happen in that camp, they are able to fall in love with each other. And Lolly is recruited to tattoo people, like newcomers that arrive at the camp, and that's his job there. At that camp, he makes friends with workers that are able to come into the camp and leave, and with those workers he's able to get like a few extra foods like chocolates, and at some point he brings chocolate to Gita, and it was just so lovely and so sad that they were falling in love and they couldn't make love to each other. My gosh. But also just imagining where they were, like at some point in the book, Lolly is sent to another area of the camp where he needs to figure out a mix-up between the tattooed numbers on a body, and he goes into a gas chamber where he witnesses naked bodies that have been gassed on top of each other, including kids. And at some point in the camp, there are Russians, airplanes going on top of the camp, and you see all these Jewish people trying to like get the attention of the airplanes. Planes just goes away, and all of a sudden you see all these SS soldiers just shoot, and kids were there in the court and they tried to run away for cover. Like, just a whole mess. And to think that and it's a true story, like this is actually a true story of Lolly and Gita, and at some point they do leave the camp. So Lolly spent 2 years in that camp. Now I don't know how long Gita spent in that camp, but she was there before when Lolly arrived at the camp. So they do manage to escape. After that, the story picks up a little, and Gita runs away with her friend, and she goes back to Bratislava. I guess that's where she lived. And Lolly also escapes, by like, he's captured by Russian's army who forces him to work for them. But he does escape as well. Now, without spoiling the story, you get to find out if Lolly and Gita reunite. So that's for you to find out and for me to know. But I really enjoyed the story. It was very sad. I had heard a little bit about the concentration camp, and again, another stain on humanity. But yeah, so if you haven't read this story, please pick it up. It is, again, a great story. Whew. Okay guys, by this time I am depleted emotionally, so I decided that Earth, no more. I traveled all the way to the galaxy, and I found myself on the Oankali world. And it is where I met Akin from Adulthood Rights, and it is by Octavia E. Butler. Now this is a sequel to Dawn. Remember Dawn, where I was trying to do the chijik? Oh wait, I have another one here. Help me say this, guys. Let's go for it. Shka hishkada. Shka hishkada. Hey guys. So yeah, as I said, this is a book about the Oankali people. They are a mix of like species with tentacles, basically. And this story, as I said, it is the sequel to Dawn. And in this one, we meet Akin. Akin is the first breed between a Oankali species with a human being. And remember, in Dawn, as I explained before, humanity have succeeded in destroying planet Earth. And now in this sequel, we basically meet Akin, who is at some point kidnapped. And he's kidnapped by who? Resistors. The resistors are the humans that are left who do not want to mix themselves with the Oankali people. So he is kidnapped by them because he looks human, and humans can no longer reproduce themselves without mixing with the Oankali. So that's why they're called resistors. And they have been blessed with longevity from the Oankali, but then some of them just gonna kill themselves because they are bored, and there's a lot of war still going on between the remainders of humanity. So Akin finds himself with the resistors, and he gets to live a year with them. And by living with them, since he's half human, he gets to understand that side of him. So he starts questioning a little bit of his human side, and strangely enough, he's able to understand the resistors. And at some point in the story, he is rescued by the Oankali people, but then he finds out that they left him there on purpose. It's not that he could not have been rescued before, but they left him there so he could learn a little bit more about the human, since he was still human, but he had like a tongue that was that was like Oankali. And he's also not gonna stay human. He's definitely gonna transform himself into an Oankali, and he does at some point. But he goes back with the Oankali people and decides to make a case for humans. And this case is that humans can still reproduce themselves. Let's just give them another planet where they could start over. and he goes and pitches that solution to the Onkali people. And fast forward, without revealing too much, I believe we would discover that in the third book. But his idea of bringing the remainder of humans onto another planet is accepted, but he will be basically in charge of that mission. So the planet where the remainder of the humans are going to live on is planet Mars. Yes, and the Onkali people will make it so that it's livable, but it would still be challenging, and that's where the story ends. So I guess in the third book we will discover how humanity does on planet Mars. But yeah, so after reading this book, my emotions were back. I was laughing, I was like joking, and I was no longer feeling sad because I found myself on a different planet. So obviously it is a fantasy book. It's an interesting read. If you read Dawn, best pick up adulthood rights. Alright guys, there you have it. Those are all the books I read for the month of March. As I said, it was quite an emotional roller coaster, but I made it through all these books. If you picked up any of these books or you know about these books, leave a comment, let me know. If you plan on picking up any of those books, do leave a comment as well. But on this note, I'm gonna conclude and say I hope you enjoyed the content of this video, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and your notification bell so that when I post a new video you are notified. All right, thank you for watching. Bye.